I wasn't supposed to be staffing the lookout that week. It was a favor, a gap in the schedule. Can you just cover 2 nights until we get someone up there? Kind of thing. I said yes because I've been saying yes to the park in some form for most of my adult life. And because the tower makes sense to me. The routine, the lists, the way your world shrinks down to weather, visibility, and a radio that either works or it doesn't. The lookout was technically decommissioned, which sounds dramatic until you realize it just means the budget moved on. The stairs were still solid, the catwalk still intact, the windows still swept clean enough to see smoke. The radio still had power if you fed the generator and kept the battery topped off. It was the kind of place you could pretend was abandoned while still being maintained, because nobody wanted to be the person who admitted they'd let it rot. The favor came from Dan in admin, the guy who always talked like he was doing you a kindness by letting you do unpaid work for him. He cornered me outside the maintenance shed like it was an accident, clipboard tucked under his arm, keys jingling. "Hey," he said, "you're still around, right?" I just stared at him until he got to the point, because that's the only way to deal with Dan. If you let him warm up, he'll waste 10 minutes making his guilt your problem. "Look," he said finally, dropping his voice like the pine trees were listening. "We got weird complaints. From the south boundary. People hear stuff. Rangers are stretched. We can't keep the tower staffed, but we also can't not, you know." He did the little shrug. Budget shrug. Liability shrug. The same shrug that always means they're going to be the Band-Aid. "You want me to sit up there and stare at trees," I said. "I want you to be a presence," he corrected. 2 nights. Maybe 3. We got a new seasonal on paperwork. He's not cleared for radios yet. I laughed once, because it was either laugh or tell him to go to hell. "Presence," I repeated. "So if something burns, I can watch it happen?" Dun's jaw tightened. "Don't be like that. It's just a cover. People see a light on, they calm down. It's optics. Optics. That word always makes my skin crawl when it's paired with safety." "Fine," I said. I'd already said yes in my head. That's how it works when you've been the guy who says yes for too long. 2 nights. I'm not hauling water up there for free, though. We'll reimburse. Dan lied automatically. "Yeah," I said. "Sure." He handed me a key and a thin binder with a rubber band around it. Like he didn't want it touching his hands too long. It's got the old log sheets, the frequency list, the procedures. "Procedures," I echoed. Dan nodded too hard. "Just follow them." "Why are you sweating?" I asked because he had that shine on his forehead like he'd jogged over, but we were standing 5 feet from his office door. He blinked at me like I'd slapped him. "I'm not. You are." He licked his lips. "It's been busy." "Busy," I said, and I let the silence sit there until he couldn't stand it. Dan finally looked away, down at the binder. "Just don't improvise up there, okay? Don't try to be a hero. If you hear something, you log it. If you see something, you call it in. Don't go looking. That's literally the job," I said. He flinched like he'd forgotten I knew what a lookout job was. "You know what I mean." I did. I just hated that he knew I knew. I got up there around late afternoon with a pack, a thermos, and my own clipboard because I don't trust other people's pens. The sun was low enough that it turned the treetops copper. From the cab, you could see the whole backside of the park. Ridgelines folding into each other, cut by long shadows and a few pale scars where lightning fires had burned years ago. The tower creaked in the wind the way all towers do. Not dangerous creaking, just the sound of wood and metal remembering they're tall. The first thing that hit me when I opened the cab door was the smell. Dust, pine pitch baked into old boards, and that stale, sweet ghost of coffee that never fully leaves a place where bored people have sat for years. The second thing that hit me was that somebody had been up there recently. Not in a maintained way, in a nervous way. Stuff had been straightened, but not thoughtfully. Like someone had cleaned while watching the windows. By the radios, right where your hand naturally goes, there was a laminated sheet tacked to the wall. Not the old 3-bullet fire season reminders. This one was newer, the laminate still clear, edges not yellowed. Somebody had printed it, trimmed it, punched holes, laminated it, then still felt the need to underline parts with a Sharpie, so hard it bit into the plastic. 5 rules. Bold numbers, like a damn spell. Rule 1. Do not request or accept assistance over unmonitored frequencies. Rule 2. If you're lost, stay put. Use 911 or the emergency phones. Do not walk toward any voice you hear. Rule 3. If you hear your own voice on the air, do not respond. Switch to dispatch only. Log the time to the minute. Rule 4. After sundown, the trapdoor stays locked. Do not open it for knocking, calling, or radio traffic that isn't dispatch. Rule 5. Keep the lookout radio volume above 3. Do not mute it. Do not turn it off. Rule 5 was the one that made me snort under my breath. It sounded like safety, like common sense, like something you tell a new hire who keeps turning the radio down because the static annoys them. The other ones felt wrong. Not wildlife wrong. Not people do dumb stuff wrong. Wrong like the park had written rules for something it didn't want to name. Under Rule 2, somebody had underlined, do not walk toward any voice you hear twice. Hard enough the black ink looked wet even though it had dried. There was also a post that stuck half under the laminate, like whoever put it up couldn't stop themselves from adding one more thing. Hand signals don't work at night. Don't flash your light back. No signature. No date. Just that, in cramped handwriting, the pen pressed so hard the paper puckered. I remember smirking at the whole thing when I first saw it. Not because it was funny, but because it was such a weird thing to have to write down. It felt like superstition in a workplace that runs on checklists and incident numbers. And then, because I'm me, I lifted the corner of the laminate and looked behind it. There was another strip of paper, older, browned at the edges, like it had been hidden there and forgotten. It wasn't a full note. It was a torn sliver from a log sheet. A timestamp column with one line, circled in red pen. 2:17. Nothing else. No description. Just the time, circled like it mattered more than the rest of the night. I slid it back and told myself it was some old inside joke. People do weird shit when they're bored alone. I did my first call in with dispatch. Gave them my location, weather red, wind direction, and the fact I had a clear view of the southern ridge. They logged it, told me to call again at 2100, and that was that. The first few hours were quiet in the way that makes you start hearing your own body. The pop of your knee when you shift. The little rasp in your throat when you swallow wrong. The hiss of the camp stove. The generator's steady thrum in the back corner, like a sleeping animal. I made coffee in a dented percolator I found under the desk because, of course, there was a percolator. I filled out a logbook. Nobody reads unless something goes wrong. I watched the light fade. The forest below turned into one solid dark mass, with only the service road cutting a faint line through it. The tower radio for the lookout was an old handheld unit plugged into a charging cradle by the window. Someone had wrapped the antenna base with a band of black electrical tape, and the casing had a crescent-shaped gouge on the bottom left corner, like it had been dropped on rock years ago and never repaired. The faceplate sticker was so sun-faded you could barely read it, but if you tilted it just right, you could make out the handwritten block letters. Lookout 3. That number had always annoyed me, because there wasn't really a Lookout 1 or 2 anymore, not officially. Just this one stubborn structure and a handful of idiots like me keeping it breathing. Around 2030, the radio squelched and popped in a way that made my shoulders lift automatically. You don't ignore that sound. Not out there. It's like your name being called in a crowd. Lookout 3, dispatch, came the voice. You copy. I pressed the transmit. Copy. Go ahead. There was a pause, then dispatch again. Same operator I'd talked to 100 times. Her name was Marla. She had that tone you develop when your job is other people's emergencies. Calm, clipped, steady, but always one breath away from sharp. We got some weird traffic earlier, Marla said. Not on our main. Just letting you know in case you hear it. I glanced at the laminated rules sheet. Define weird, I said, because I couldn't stop myself. Marla exhaled into the mic like she was tired of being the adult in the room. Unmonitored channel. Someone calling for ranger assistance. Using the word lookout. My stomach tightened a little. Someone knows there's a tower up here. Yeah, Marla said. Probably kids, or someone with an old radio. You're not to answer anything that isn't us. If you hear it, log it. That's all. I looked at Rule 1 and the heavy underlines like they were staring back. Copy, I said. I won't engage. I'm in it. I really did. I'm not some idiot who thinks he's going to solve the woods by walking into them. At 2100, I called dispatch with my update. Wind had picked up. Temperature dropping. Visibility still good. No smoke. Copy, Marla said. If you hear anything unusual, do not respond. Do not leave the tower. Rangers are already stretched thin. The already landed heavy, like it had been that kind of week. Copy, I repeated. I remember looking at the trapdoor after that. The hatch in the floor that led down into the stairwell. The way it sat there like a mouth you could choose to open or not. I remember thinking, for no logical reason, that it would be easy to step out onto the catwalk and look down and check the perimeter just to prove to myself nothing was out there. I didn't do it. I locked the trapdoor like I always do in old structures, because it keeps the wind from rattling it. I set my flashlight beside the logbook. I took my boots off and put them by the chair because I didn't want to track grit onto the floor, and because some part of me was trying to make the tower feel normal. Habits, little rituals, the kind that keep your brain from inventing monsters. The wind made the tower sway in tiny movements you don't notice unless you focus on them. And I try not to focus. At 2217, the radio squelched again, but this time it wasn't dispatch. Not a call sign, not a proper prefix, not even the click pattern the park radios make when the mic keys. Just a soft, wet click, then a voice thin through static. Ranger. I froze with my coffee halfway to my mouth. I didn't touch the transmit button. The voice came again, a little clearer. Ranger, I need help. It sounded like a man trying to keep panic down, breathing too fast. Words clipped, the kind of voice you hear right before people do something stupid. I stared at the radio like it was going to bite me. The rule sheet was right there in my peripheral vision. Do not request or accept assistance over unmonitored frequencies. If you're lost, stay put. Do not walk toward any voice. Do not respond. I sat still. The voice tried again. I'm on Trail 6, I think. I'm lost. I can't find the pull-off. Ranger Station, do you copy? Trail 6 was on the backside. It wasn't the busiest trail, but it wasn't obscure. People wandered on it all the time, thinking it was easy because the first mile is flat. Then they hit the ridge and lose daylight, and suddenly it's not a fun little hike anymore. My thumb hovered over transmit, then stopped. I told myself I could call dispatch. That's the right move. Log it. Let someone with authority decide if it's real. Let someone with a gun and a truck deal with it. I picked up the handset for the main dispatch channel. Before I could key it, the unmonitored voice came again, lower now, like it was leaning closer to the mic. I can hear you up there, it said. Please. My throat went dry. You could hear the tower, the generator hum, the wind rubbing the pines, a small clink when the coffee pot cooled. But hear you up there made it feel like there was a line between us that wasn't radio at all. Like the voice wasn't coming from somewhere distant. Like it was coming from below me through the wood. I keyed dispatch. Dispatch, lookout 3. Go ahead, Marla said immediately. Alert now. The comm snapped into place like armor. I'm receiving traffic on an unmonitored frequency, I said. Caller claims lost on Trail 6. Says he can't hear me up here. There was a pause, then Marla again, quieter. Do not engage. We'll send a unit to check Trail 6 access points. Stay in the tower. Confirm you're secure. I'm secure, I said. Trapdoor locked. Copy, she said. Do not leave. Do not respond. I set the handset down. On the unmonitored channel, the man's voice changed. It went flat for a second, like the emotion dropped out. Like somebody had cut the string on the puppet and it fell still. Then it said in my own voice, Lookout 3 dispatch. I felt my stomach drop in a way I haven't felt since I was a kid and a car spun out on ice right in front of me. It wasn't perfect studio quality mimicry. It was radio thin, but it was my cadence, my breath, the tiny throat clear I do without thinking before I speak. The way my dispatch comes out like dispatch when I'm tired. The radio clicked again, and my own voice repeated, "Go ahead." I didn't move. I didn't even breathe right. The unmonitored channel kept going like it was practicing. My location, weather read, it wasn't repeating whole sentences cleanly. It was pulling phrases out of context, stitching them together like a child learning to talk by stealing words. It sounded wrong in a way that made my teeth hurt, like hearing a song you know sung half a beat off. Rule 3 flashed in my head. If you hear your own voice on the air, do not respond. Switch to dispatch only. Log the time to the minute. I grabbed the lookout radio and turned the volume down until the speaker was barely audible. Not off. I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. Off felt like it would be worse, like closing your eyes when you're sure something is still there. I wrote in the logbook with a shaking hand. 2217, unmonitored traffic. Male voice. Trail 6. Mimic my call sign and dispatch phrasing. I underlined mimic twice, hard enough the pen tore the paper. The tower creaked. Outside, the wind rose and fell. Then I heard something that wasn't radio at all. A knock, not on the trapdoor, on the base of the tower, far below. One heavy knock, metal on wood. I stood so fast the chair scraped. My coffee sloshed and burned my fingers, and I didn't even react. I leaned toward the hatch, listening. Another knock. Then, faintly, a voice from below, carried up through the stairwell like someone standing at the bottom and shouting carefully, testing how far sound travels. "Ranger!" My skin tightened like cold water hit it. No one should have been down there. The access road is gated at night. There are signs. There are cameras, even if they're old. There are motion lights that are supposed to kick on. I moved to the window and looked down. The base of the tower was a black shape among darker trees. The moonlight didn't reach the ground well. My own reflection stared back at me in the glass. Pale face, wide eyes, coffee on my hand like blood. I saw nothing. Then the voice came again from directly below the tower, and it sounded like Marla. "Lookout 3, it said perfectly. Come down. We need you." My mouth went numb. Dispatch would never tell me to leave the tower at night for a lost camper without sending a unit. Dispatch would never use that tone, urgent and casual at the same time, like it was a minor inconvenience. I reached for the main dispatch handset, so fast I almost dropped it. "Dispatch, lookout 3, I said, forcing my voice steady. "Confirm you did not send anyone to Tower Base." Marla answered instantly, and there was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. A tightness, like she was holding something back, like she'd been waiting for me to say that exact sentence. "Negative," Marla said. "No units at your location. Stay in the tower. Do not open the hatch." As she spoke, the voice from below overlapped her. "Do not open the hatch," it said in Marla's voice, same timing, same slight rasp on the H in hatch. Not through the radio speaker, through the stairs. It was like the tower itself was relaying it, like the wood had learned her voice and was repeating it. I backed away from the trapdoor until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. Marla kept talking, faster now. "Listen to me. Do not respond to any voice that is not on this channel. Do not open the tower. Units are en route to the access road. Do you understand?" "Understand," I said, but my voice came out thin like a lie. Below, the knocking started again. Slow, patient, knock, pause, knock, like it knew I was counting. The unmonitored radio hissed in the background, even with the volume low, and through it, I heard my own voice whispering, "Please." That's the part that makes me angry when I think about it. Not the creature, not the scratches, not even the fear, the please, because it wasn't threatening me. It wasn't roaring or smashing things like in a movie. It was asking. It was using the exact tone that makes you feel like an asshole for not helping. And I've been the guy who helps. That's my whole problem. That's how I ended up in that tower in the first place. I don't know what did it. I've replayed the next part 100 times, and I still can't point to a single moment where my brain broke. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was like a series of tiny rationalizations stacking up until I couldn't see the drop-off anymore. Maybe someone really was down there. Maybe a hiker found the tower and was terrified. Maybe dispatch was wrong and a unit had already made it to the base and Marla didn't have the update yet. Maybe the voice from below was a ranger trying to keep calm. Maybe I just needed to lean over the hatch and shout, "Stay there," and that would be it. Maybe the rule sheet was some overreaction from last season. Maybe Dan had handed me a binder full of superstition and I was letting it get to me. Maybe I was being dramatic. I hate myself for the thought even now, but there was another thing too. A softer hook, one that went under the ribs. The voice from below sounded like my brother. Not at first. At first it was Marla. It was my own voice. Then it shifted like it was turning a dial in the dark. My younger brother has been dead for 3 years. Quel accident. Wrong place, wrong time, drunk driver. I didn't get to say goodbye the way you think you'll get to say goodbye. One day he's laughing at some stupid video on his phone. The next day, I'm standing in a hospital hallway staring at a vending machine because the fluorescent lights are too bright to look at anything else. I hadn't heard his voice in a long time. Not cleanly, not without memory blurring it. From below the tower, through the stairwell, came his voice, small like he was trying not to scare me. "Hey," it said. "It's cold." My eyes stung so fast it pissed me off. Like my body betrayed me before my brain could catch it. I stepped toward the hatch like a sleepwalker. Marla was still in my ear, but it sounded far away now, like a TV in another room. "Look out 3, she said. Do not open." I reached down and touched the lock anyway. The metal was cold. The little click when you turn is familiar. Comforting even. A stupid detail to latch onto when you're scared. The second the lock turned, the knocking stopped. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was just empty, like the woods had held its breath. I pulled the hatch up an inch and peered down into the stairwell. Blackness. A faint smell of damp wood and old rust. The air felt colder than it should, like the tower was a chimney pulling something up. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear breathing. Then, from halfway down the stairs, the radio crackle sound happened again, but it wasn't coming from the lookout radio. It was coming from the stairwell itself, like static in the air. Like the darkness had a frequency. And my brother's voice said softly, "Come on. Rule 4. After sundown, the trapdoor stays locked. Do not open it for knocking, calling, or radio traffic that isn't dispatch." I opened it anyway. The cold air that came up was wrong. It wasn't just night air. It smelled sour, like wet fur left in a plastic bag, and under it metallic, like pennies, like a mouth. I backed up, hand on my flashlight, and Marla's voice sharpened so hard it could have cut glass. "Look out 3, what are you doing?" she snapped. "Confirm you are in the tower and the hatch is secured." "Elite." "In the tower," I said. "Hatch secured." The words tasted like pennies too, like the air from the stairwell had crawled into my mouth. I don't know why I lied. Maybe because part of me already knew I was about to do something I couldn't explain. Maybe because if I admitted it out loud, even to dispatch, it would become real. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped down into the stairwell. The tower groaned as my weight shifted onto the stairs. That groan had always been comforting before, like an old building talking. Now it sounded like complaint. Each step down felt like stepping into thicker air. The darkness pressed in tight around the flashlight beam, making it feel small and weak. The metal railing was cold under my hand, slick with condensation that shouldn't have been there. It hadn't rained. The night air was dry. Halfway down, the beam caught something on a step, a strip of reflective tape, part trail marker tape, the kind you see wrapped around branches near a washout so hikers don't wander into a hole. It was stuck to the metal like someone had pressed it there. I stopped so hard my boot squeaked. That tape shouldn't have been inside the tower. Nobody comes up here and starts peeling markers off trees to decorate. And if they did, why here? Why halfway down, like a breadcrumb? The voice from below didn't rush me. It just said, patient in my brother's voice, almost there. I kept going because I'd already broken the dam in my head and now the water was moving. At the bottom, the tower's base platform was open to the air. From there you step onto the ground, onto packed dirt and needles. The flashlight beam swept across the base supports, the old maintenance box, the little post where the fire extinguisher used to hang, the ring bolt where they used to chain the gate. No person, no rangertruk, no fresh footprints. The night was too quiet in the way that makes your ears ring. Even the wind seemed to have moved around the tower instead of through it. "Ranger," I called, and my voice sounded too loud, like it didn't belong out there. Nothing answered. Then the lookout radio, still up in the cab, crackled faintly through the structure. And in my own voice, it said, "Here." The word came from the trees to my left too, at the exact same time. "Here." Like two speakers playing the same track. My stomach dropped hard enough, I almost gagged. It felt like my insides wanted out. I backed toward the tower stairs, trying not to move fast, because fast movements make you pray. That thought flashed through my head like it was already written there. The flashlight beam caught movement between two trunks. Not a full shape, just a shift. Something tall adjusting its weight. I swung the light fully and saw it. It was upright, but it wasn't standing like a man. It looked assembled wrong. Too thin, too long, arms hanging low with too many joints, like somebody had tried to build a person out of bent fence posts. The head wasn't antlers. It wasn't a skull. It was like skin pulled tight over something sharp. Ridges under the surface like bones that didn't match any animal I know. A mouth that didn't sit right on the face, stretched farther than it should be, like the skin had been tugged there and left. The worst part was the eyes. Not glowing, not bright. Dull, wet reflections in the flashlight beam, like stones at the bottom of a creek. Like something you'd step on barefoot in shallow water and not notice until it cut you. It didn't charge. That's what I expected, stupidly. A rush, a scream, a lunge. It stepped forward once, quiet and confident, closing distance in a way my brain couldn't map properly. Like it slid and walked at the same time. Like the space between us got shorter without it having to hurry. I turned and ran. I hit the stairs and took them two at a time, boots clanging on metal. My hand shook so hard I nearly missed the railing. Behind me, something moved through brush without crashing. It sounded like it knew exactly where to place its weight. No snapping branches, no stumbling, just that soft, deliberate shifting like someone moving through a room they've memorized in the dark. I got 5 steps up before a sound like a dry throat clicking came from right below the tower, closer than it should have been. I looked down without meaning to. It was on the first landing already, climbing without haste, long limbs folding wrong. The joints didn't bend like knees and elbows. They bent like cheap pocket knife hinges. My flashlight beam caught its hands on the rail. Hands like bundled sticks. Fingers too long, too many joints gripping like clamps. I bolted up again, lungs burning so fast it felt like I'd inhaled sparks. The tower creaked in protest, like it hated being part of this. I hit the trapdoor platform and shoved the hatch up, scrambling through. My shoulder slammed the frame. Pain shot down my arm, but I didn't care. I got one knee into the cab and reached back to slam the hatch. And something caught me. Not a grip, a swipe, a fast, cold rake across my back through my shirt, like dragging a handful of bent nails from shoulder blade to ribs. The pain didn't even register right away. It was heat and shock and a breath that turned into a noise I didn't recognize as mine. I fell forward into the cab, slammed my palms on the floor, and kicked back hard. The hatch dropped, wood thudded into place. Then the burning hit full force. It lit up my whole back like someone had poured hot water under my skin. I scrambled upright and fumbled for the lock. It didn't align. My hand was shaking too much. I kept stabbing the key into the latch like that would make it obey. Below me, the hatch bumped once, gently, as if something had tested it. Then again, I shoved my weight onto it and finally got the lock to catch with a metallic click. I pressed my back against the far wall of the cab and felt wetness spreading under my shirt. The scratches stung with every breath, each inhale pulling at torn fabric and skin like the injury wanted to remind me it was there. Marla was still on my actual channel, voice edged with panic now. Lookout 3, respond. Respond now. Under my feet, another voice repeated her exact word a half-second later, using her tone so well it made my teeth ache. Respond now. Not through the radio, through the floor. I forced myself to key dispatch. It's at the tower, I said, words coming out in ragged pieces. It mimics. It got into the stairwell. My voice hitched when my back spasmed. I tasted copper from biting down too hard. Marla didn't waste time asking what it was. Stay away from the hatch. Barricade if you can. Units are 2 minutes out. 2 minutes, I repeated stupidly like I could hold on to that. The hatch bumped again, harder, a sound like claws or nails dragging along the wood. My stomach rolled. My back was on fire. I could feel warm trickles running down into my waistband. I grabbed the heavy chair and shoved it over the hatch. Then I grabbed the small table and jammed it against the chair. The tower shook slightly, and for the first time I realized the thing wasn't just testing the hatch. It was putting weight on the tower, like it was climbing the supports. The windows rattled. The catwalk outside the cab gave a soft metallic ping as something stepped onto it. Rule 5 flashed in my head in the dumbest way. Keep the lookout radio volume above 3. Do not mute it. Do not turn it off. I don't know why that's what my brain clung to. Maybe because it was something to do, something controllable. I reached for the radio and my hand froze. If I turned it down, I'd be breaking a rule. If I left it up, I'd have to hear it. The flashlight beam caught a shadow pass over the window. Tall, too thin. I backed away until I hit the far wall of the cab, my back screaming, and I nearly blacked out from the sudden flare of pain. The radio shrieked with static. Not Marla, the other channel, bleeding in like a stain. And then, in my own voice, right in the speaker by my ear, it said softly, "Come down." The window behind me thudded once like something tapped it with a knuckle. Then again, harder. I saw the outline press against the glass for a split second. Not a face, not clear, just a suggestion of that stretched mouth and ridged head. The glass bowed. It didn't break, but it flexed enough to make me realize how old it was. How many winters it had seen. How many times it had been heated and cooled and stressed. The thing outside didn't rush. It didn't slam wildly. It tapped, then waited, then tapped again, like it knew time was on its side. Marla kept talking, telling me to hold, to stay put, that headlights were on the access road, that they were almost there. Her voice was the only thing that sounded human, and even that kept getting echoed back through the floor with that tiny delay, like a cruel laugh. "Hold position," Marla said. "Hold position," the tower said back in her voice. Then the voice on the other side of the glass shifted. It softened. It got small. My brother's voice again. "I'm scared," it said. That almost got me. I won't lie. My hand moved toward the hatch without permission. A reflex built from a lifetime of responding to voices asking for help. From being the older brother. From being the guy who shows up. I stopped myself by biting down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. The tapping on the window stopped. For a few seconds, the tower was still except for my breathing and the faint crackle of radios and the slow drip of something warm down my side under my shirt. Then something scraped across the roof. Slow, like fingernails being dragged along metal. The sound traveled from one end of the roof to the other, then stopped above my head. I looked up without meaning to. The ceiling was thin paneling. If something heavy sat on it, the whole cab would feel it. The tower creaked, a deep groan, like it was taking a breath. And then the hatch behind my barricade bumped from below again. 2 directions. It was on the roof and under the floor. Or it wanted me to think it was. My ears filled with that static feeling like pressure. My vision tunneled. I could feel my heart in my throat. Then headlights washed the trees below in white beams, sweeping back and forth. A Ranger truck. Another. Real engines. Real tires on gravel. Real human noise. Radios on Marla's channel erupted with voices. Call signs. Orders. Real human urgency. The scraping on the roof stopped immediately. The tapping stopped. The pressure under the hatch eased like a hand lifting. For one shaky breath, I thought it was over, that it would retreat when there were more people, that it only hunted lonely. Then, over the unmonitored channel, in Marla's exact voice, came a calm instruction. Units, proceed off-road. Follow the voice. I heard one of the rangers on the main channel hesitate. Dispatch, confirm. Marla snapped, real and sharp, and I loved her for it in that moment. Negative. Stay on the road. Do not go off-road. Do not follow any voice. And then, like it was enjoying itself, the unmonitored channel repeated her denial in her voice, but with a tiny twist, like a smile hidden in it. Proceed. Below, one of the trucks swung its lights toward the tree line, sweeping the trunks. For a brief second, the beam caught the edge of something at the boundary of light. Tall, too thin, half hidden like it didn't want to be fully seen, like it didn't need to be. Then it stepped back into the woods, and the darkness swallowed it. The Rangers didn't chase. Thank God they didn't chase. They didn't play hero. They stayed on the road like Marla told them, sweeping the area with lights, calling my name up at the tower, not once using the unmonitored channel. I didn't move from the far wall. I stayed curled around myself like if I made myself small enough, the tower would forget I was inside it. When one of them finally yelled up, "We're here. You okay?" I almost answered out loud like a kid. My throat was so tight, it would have been a croak anyway. Marla kept me on the line until dawn. Not because she needed updates, because she didn't want me alone with the echo. Every time she spoke, that other voice tried to follow, but it got weaker as the sky lightened, like daylight peeled it away from the tower. When the first gray showed in the east, my hands finally stopped shaking enough to unlock the hatch. The barricade chair scraped when I moved it, and the sound made me flinch like something would answer from below. Nothing did. The Rangers walked me down the tower with two people on either side like I was the fragile one, like I was the problem. Boots clanging on metal, radios crackling, one of them smelling like menthol and sweat. Halfway down, my shirt had dried stiff against my back. Every step made the scratches flare again, like the air itself was cutting me. At the step where I'd seen the reflective tape, one of the Rangers stopped. He shined his light even though it was daylight now, because some habits don't care about the sun. "What the hell is that?" he said. The strip of trail marker tape was still there, pressed to the metal like it had grown out of it. "I didn't put it there," I said too fast. The Ranger looked at me like I'd said I didn't put the blood on my own shirt. He said. I hated him for that. I hated how normal he sounded, like this was me being dramatic and him being patient and the woods being the woods. At the base, another Ranger walked the perimeter while the older one, his name tag said Henley, kept watching my back like he was trying to decide if I'd fallen or fought. "You hit something?" Henley asked. I shook my head once because I didn't know how to answer without sounding like a lunatic. He crouched, peered at the dirt by the tower supports, then stood and wiped his hands on his pants like he'd found nothing, and that proved everything. "Trail 6 is empty," someone said into the radio. "No hikers." Marla's voice came back, controlled but flat with exhaustion. "Copy." Henley looked up at the tower like he didn't like it. "We'll take you to the office," he said. "You need to file an incident." "I already logged it," I said. He gave me that same look again. The one that says, "That's cute." In the park office later, with fluorescent lights humming and a space heater rattling in the corner, I tried to explain what happened in a way that didn't make me sound like I'd lost my mind in the dark. I talked about radio interference, about prank calls, about someone with a scanner messing around, about an animal under the tower that spooked me. Henley listened with his arms crossed, jaw tight, like every word was something he'd have to write down and defend later. Dan showed up halfway through and hovered by the door like he didn't want to breathe the same air. He kept looking at my back like he expected the scratches to start talking. "You open the hatch?" Henley asked suddenly, blunt as a hammer. "No," I lied, immediately, because I'm an idiot and because the truth felt like handing them a weapon. Henley's eyes narrowed. "Then how'd you get that?" I leaned out. I said, "Something reached." Henley stared at me for a long beat. Then he looked at Marla through the glass window of the dispatch cubicle, like he wanted her to confirm something without saying it. Marla didn't look up. She just kept typing. Dan finally cleared his throat. "We should get him checked out," he said, voice too loud. Liability voice again. "They sent me to urgent care in town the way they do when paperwork starts to smell like liability." The nurse didn't ask many questions. She just had me turn around, lifted my shirt carefully, and went quiet for a second. "You got lucky," she said. "They cleaned the scratches, bandaged them in long strips, and told me to watch for infection." The back of my shirt went into a plastic bag like evidence. I drove back to the park office with my shoulders locked, trying not to move too much because every shift tugged at the raw lines under the gauze. When I walked in, Henley was gone. Dan was gone. The building felt emptier, like it was holding on to the morning. Marla was there, though, still at her desk, eyes red like she hadn't blinked right. She didn't greet me. She didn't ask how I was. She just slid a binder toward me across the counter, open to a page that looked like it had been read too many times. Incident reports, dates, channels, notes written in different handwriting, different pens, some crisp, some shaky. 2217 appears more than once. Words like unmonitored, mimicry, tower base, voice from stairs. At the bottom of the page was a line underlined twice, hard enough the paper was creased. "If it uses your voice, it already has you." I stared at that sentence until the letters stopped looking like letters and started looking like something carved. Marla finally met my eyes, and she didn't look surprised. She looked like she'd been waiting for me to catch up. Marla didn't say anything for a long second. She just sat there with the binder open like it weighed 100 pounds, and she'd been carrying it alone. I try to make a joke because that's what I do when I'm cornered. "So this is like a park ghost policy manual?" Her mouth twitched once. Not a smile, more like pain. "Don't," she said. One word. Flat. Like she'd slapped my hand away from a hot stove. I leaned in closer anyway, because the page kept pulling my eyes back. Dates. Times. Those same words. That same stupid, neat, circled 217 I'd seen tucked behind the laminate up in the tower. "How many times?" I asked. Marla stared at the binder like she could see through the paper. "Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you," she snapped, and there was the first real crack in her dispatcher voice. The human part. The part that sounded like she'd been awake for 3 days. I swallowed. My back burned under the bandages. The chair creaked. Every sound in that office felt too sharp. Why the hell is it still there? I asked. Why is the tower still a thing, if this is a thing? Marla's eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward the door where Dan had been hovering earlier, like she didn't want him hearing. "Because it's easier to keep it quiet than to explain why you shut down a lookout because of voices," she said. "Because if you tell people don't answer radios, they answer radios harder. Because the first time some blogger writes haunted tower, we get idiots driving up there with scanners and beer, and the whole south boundary turns into a damn carnival." My jaw clenched. "So your plan is to keep putting people up there until one of them gets torn open?" Marla's stare hardened. "My plan is to keep people alive. That's what dispatch does. We tell you where the fire is, where the lightning hit, where the lost kid wandered, and we tell you not to be stupid. We don't get to choose the budget. We don't get to choose Dan." I almost laughed again at that. Dan is a force of nature. Dan is weather. "Henley knows," I said. Marla's nostrils flared. "Henley knows enough to stay on the road. That's all he needs to know." I looked down at the binder again. Why 217? Marla's fingers tightened on the edge of the counter. For the first time since I walked in there, she looked like she wanted to run, like she had an itch under her skin. "That's when it starts getting bold," she said quietly. "That's when it starts moving from the air to closer." "Closer how?" Marla didn't answer. She slid the binder back toward herself like she'd already said too much. I shoved my hands into my pockets so I wouldn't grab it again. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "This is insane," I said, like saying it would make it less true. "It doesn't care if you believe it," Marla said. Then she looked up at me and her voice shifted, just slightly, into something more personal. You opened the hatch. It wasn't a question. My throat tightened. I heard Henley's blunt, "You opened the hatch." Again, like it was stuck on repeat in my skull. I'd lied to him. I'd lied to Marla on the radio. I'd lied so many times in 12 hours I couldn't tell where the truth sat anymore. I started. Marla cut me off. "Don't lie to me. Not after I held you on the line all night." I stared at the scuffed linoleum because her eyes felt like a spotlight. "Yeah," I said finally. "I did." Marla's face didn't change, but her shoulders dropped like she'd been carrying something and just set it down. "It got your voice," she said. It already had my voice on the radio before I opened it. I argued because part of me wanted to fight the idea that I'd done this to myself. It was already doing that. Marla shook her head once. "It had a taste. It didn't have you. There's a difference." My mouth went dry. "So what now?" Marla held my gaze like she was trying to tattoo the next words onto my brain. "Now you don't answer anything that isn't on a monitor channel. Now you don't go back up there. Now you don't play Prove It with the Woods. Now, if you hear your brother's voice anywhere outside your memories, you treat it like a knife." My jaw worked. I hated how cleanly she said it, like she'd practiced. "And if it comes to my house?" I asked, and I heard how desperate that sounded the second it left my mouth. Marla's face went still again. Dispatcher face. Professional. Lockdown. "It doesn't leave the boundary," she said. The way she said it wasn't convincing. It wasn't a lie exactly. It was what you tell someone because you need them to leave your counter and go home and maybe calm down enough to not do something stupid. I stared at her until she looked away first. Then she slid one thing across the counter. Not the binder. A little printed incident form. Blank. For me to fill out. In the top corner, someone had stamped it with a red box. "Confidential internal use." "Dan's going to want this," she said. "Henley's going to want this. They're going to want you to keep your story clean. Interference. Wildlife. Unknown person at base. You can say that if you want. It won't change what happened." I took the form without looking at it. Marla's voice dropped again, almost to a whisper, like she was stepping over a line. "And if you wake up at 2:17, she said, "don't go looking for the source. Don't investigate. You hear me?" My stomach turned cold. "You've had people wake up at. Go." Marla snapped, louder, like she'd caught herself. Like she'd said too much again. "Go home. Get stitched up. And don't answer." I left the office with that form folded in my pocket like a threat. The air outside was bright and stupid. Birds made noise. A guy in a maintenance cart waved at me like we just finished a normal shift. My truck smelled like pine needles and stale fast food wrappers. When I sat down, my shirt tugged at the bandages and the pain punched through me hard enough I had to breathe shallow. The drive into town took 40 minutes. I watched the tree line the whole way, like something was going to step out onto the road and raise a hand and say my name. Nothing did. That's what messes with you. The way the world keeps being normal after it stops being normal. Like you're the only one who heard the joke and it wasn't funny. At urgent care, the nurse did her calm little "you got lucky" line, taped me up, and sent me out with antibiotics and that paper bag with my ruined shirt like I'd been in a bar fight. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and stared at the bag. The plastic crinkled when I moved. The shirt inside looked like someone had tried to rake a garden and hit cloth instead of dirt. I should have driven straight home. Instead, I drove back to the park office because I'm apparently addicted to making the worst choices in sequence. Dan was there this time, waiting like he knew I'd come back. He was standing by the counter with his arms folded, trying to look concerned and competent at the same time. Henley was with him, leaning against the wall like a cop at a DMV. Dan spotted me and did the fake sympathy face. "You okay?" I didn't answer. I walked right up and dropped the paper bag on the counter. The shirt inside slumped like a body. Dan's eyes flicked down, then away fast, like he didn't like seeing proof. Henley pushed off the wall. "Doc stitch you." "Bandaged," I said. Henley nodded like that was good enough. Then his eyes went to the bag again. "You gonna tell me how you got those?" Because leaned out doesn't match the angle. I felt heat rise up my neck. You want the truth? Henley's mouth tightened. I want something I can write down that doesn't make me sound like a crazy person. Dan jumped in quick. Let's keep it professional, okay? We just need an account for the file. You were on duty. There was unusual radio traffic. You got spooked. You injured yourself in a fall, or... I didn't fall. I cut in. Den blinket. Okay. Then, you were startled by an animal. No animal climbs a tower like that, I said, and my voice came out harsher than I meant. Henley's eyes narrowed. Like what? I looked at the fluorescent lights, at the bulletin board with lost and found keys pinned to it, at the coffee stains on the counter, at Dan's stupid logo polo. My brain kept trying to shove the night into this bright room, and it wouldn't fit. It mimicked dispatch, I said finally. It mimicked me. It mimicked my brother. It was at the base. It came up. Dan's hand slapped the counter. No. The sound cracked like a whip in the quiet office. Henley stared at Dan, surprised. Dan's face was flushed. No. He repeated, lower now, like he was trying to get control back. You are not writing that. You're not saying that. Not on paper. Not in a report. Do you understand me? My chest tightened. What? Dan swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward dispatch, like he didn't want Marla hearing. Because it creates liability, he said, and it came out automatic like he'd rehearsed. Then he seemed to realize how ugly that sounded and tried to soften it. Because if you put mimic on a report and it leaks, we get attention. We get idiots. We get lawsuits. We get people demanding to see. People already got hurt. I snapped. I got hurt. Don's jaw clenched. You volunteered. The words hit me harder than any scratch. There it was. The true Dan. The guy who treats humans like optional line items. Henley's voice went cold. Done. Dan waved him off without looking. I'm just saying, we can handle this internally. We don't need. What the hell is this? I said, because Marla's got a binder full of incident reports, Dan. Don't act like this is new. Dan's face went still. Too still. His eyes pinned me. Marla showed you that. You left me alone with her, I said. She did what you want. Dan leaned closer over the counter. His voice dropped into something mean. You don't know what you're talking about. I know I heard my brother's voice in a stairwell, I said, and my own voice shook on it, which pissed me off. I know something dragged itself up a tower without making a damn sound. I know it tried to pull rangers off-road by copying dispatch. I know. Dan slammed his palm again. Stop. Henley stepped forward now, between us. Enough, he said, and his tone was cop voice, the kind that ends fights. He looked at me. Did you open a hatch? I stared at him. Henley held my gaze without blinking. Dan's mouth tightened like he already knew the answer and hated it. Yes, I said. Dan's face twisted. Jesus Christ. Henley's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, like a piece clicked into place. You opened it after dark, he said. Yes. And you went down? I hesitated. Henley's voice went sharper. Did you go down, son? I went down, I said. Dan threw his hands up like I'd admitted to arson. Unbelievable. Henley turned his head slightly, like he was talking to Dan without taking his eyes off me. He broke procedure. He broke common sense, Dan hissed. Henley finally looked away from me and toward Dan. Do we have a procedure for when someone breaks it? He asked, and there was something pointed in that question. Dan's mouth opened, then closed. Henley looked back at me. Why'd you do it? Because I'm stupid. Because I wanted to help. Because I wanted to hear my dead brother again. Because it asked nicely. Because it sounded scared. Because it knew how to press the right button. I couldn't say that in this office. I thought someone was hurt, I said, and it wasn't a complete lie. Henley nodded once, slow. Okay. Dan snapped. No, it's not okay. Henley's voice stayed calm. It's done. Dan jabbed a finger at the paper in my pocket. You're going to write radio interference and unknown person at base and injury sustained while securing hatch, and you're going to sign it. And then you're going to stay quiet. That's how this goes. I laughed once sharp. Or what? Dan's eyes hardened. Or you'll never volunteer here again. You'll get trespassed. You're going to trespass me from a public park? I said, "Good luck with that." Henley's voice cut in again. "Dan, stop threatening him." Dan's face went red. "I'm not threatening. I'm managing." Henley stared at him for a long beat. Then he looked back at me, and his voice dropped. "Go home," he said like he meant it. "You're done," Dan barked. "He's not done until he signs." Henley turned on Dan so fast it was almost funny. "He's done," he said, and the room went quiet under it. Dan's mouth worked like he wanted to argue. Then he looked at me again, and his eyes did something ugly. "You think you're the first," Dan said quietly. My stomach tightened. Dan's lips curled like he couldn't help himself. "You think you're special because you heard some weird shit on a radio? People hear things out there all the time. People get spooked. People want stories. You want to make it into a monster? Go ahead. But don't drag the park down with you." Henley snapped, "Dan, shut up." Dan didn't. He looked right at me. "You brought it on yourself when you opened the hatch." There it was. The line. The blame. The clean little way to make this my fault so the park can keep being the park. My hands clenched. I felt my back pull under the bandages. "You knew," I said, and my voice came out low. "You knew there was a reason those rules were there, and you still sent me up." Dan's eyes flicked to the side. Just for a second. "Guilty." "Telling. I sent you up to watch for smoke," Dan said. "Bullshit," I said. Henley's jaw tightened. "Go," he told me again, more urgent now. Like he didn't want me in that building with Dan any longer. I didn't look at Dan when I left. If I had, I might have done something stupid. I might have made it physical. And I didn't want Dan's fingerprints on my life any more than they already were. I drove home with my radio off. Not the park radio. My truck radio. Silence felt safer. My apartment was a one-bedroom in a complex that always smelled like fryer grease from the place next door. Thin walls. A neighbor who played bass at midnight. The kind of place where you hear other people living and it's annoying, but it also means you're not alone. That night, I wanted the annoyance. I wanted proof the world was still stupid and crowded and human. I took a shower and the hot water made my back scream. I stood there with my forehead against the tile, breathing through my teeth, watching pink water swirl down the drain and feeling my stomach flip because it looked too much like blood. When I got out, I couldn't bring myself to look at the scratches for long. I saw them in flashes in the mirror when I turned. Parallel lines, angry and swollen, like something had combed me open. I put on a clean shirt carefully like I was handling a wound on someone else. Then I sat on my couch and stared at my coffee table like it had an answer. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You still up there?" I stared at it. My thumb hovered. Then another text came in from the same number. "Don't answer that shit. Do not answer." That one hit different. That one sounded like a person panicking. I typed back without thinking. "Who is this?" 3 little dots popped up like they were typing. Then nothing. I waited. My skin prickled. I felt stupid sitting in my own living room acting like a text message could bite me. Another buzz. Unknown number again. 217. That's all it said. My stomach dropped. I stood up so fast my knees hit the coffee table. I called the number back. It rang once. Twice. Then it picked up, and all I heard was static. Not phone static. Radio static. That soft squelch like someone keyed a mic and let go. I yanked the phone away from my ear like it burned. The call dropped. My phone screen went dark. No missed call. No record. Like it hadn't happened. I stood there in my apartment with my heartbeat pounding, and I realized I was doing exactly what Marla told me not to do. I was chasing the source. I was investigating. I was feeding it attention. I turned my phone off and threw it on the couch like it was a snake. Then I did the thing people do when they want to pretend they're in control. I checked my locks. Front door. Deadbolt. Chain. Sliding balcony door. Window latches. Like a set of little rituals could hold something back. I didn't sleep much. Why did it drift off? It was shallow. I kept dreaming about the tower stairs. In the dream, each step down had a strip of reflective tape on it, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading nowhere. In the dream, I followed them anyway. The next day, I called in sick to my actual job, which is the funniest part. Like my boss at the warehouse gives a shit about forest monsters. My boss didn't even ask what was wrong. He just said, "You got a note?" I said, "Yeah," and hung up. No note, no plan, just that raw feeling of being cut open and stitched badly. I tried to keep busy, cleaned my kitchen, did laundry, anything to keep my hands moving and my brain from replaying the sound of my brother's voice saying it's cold. Around noon, my neighbor knocked. The bass guy, mid-30s, always wearing gym shorts, always smelling like weed. "Yo," he said, "you were screaming last night." I blinked. I wasn't. He squinted at me. "Dude, you were talking. Like loud. Like you were arguing with someone." My blood went cold. "What time?" He shrugged. "Late. 2:30? I don't know. I was high." I forced a laugh that sounded like choking. Probably a dream. He stared at me a second longer, then shrugged again. "Whatever, man. Just keep it down." He left, and I stood in my doorway like an idiot and stared down the hallway. 2:30. My eyes flicked to the microwave clock. I hadn't set it after the power blink last week, so it was wrong, flashing 12 o'clock like a broken smile. I opened my phone to check the time out of habit, then remembered I'd turned it off. I left it off. The park called that afternoon. Dan's number. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it go again, then a third time. Finally, I answered, because apparently I like pain. Dan didn't say hello. "You gonna come in and sign the report?" "No," I said. Dan exhaled hard like he'd been holding anger all day. "This is not optional. It is for me," I said. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," Dan snapped. "It tore my back open," I said. "That feels pretty big." Dan's voice went colder. "You opened the hatch." There was again, like a chant. "Stop saying that like it explains anything," I said. "You broke procedure and you got hurt," Dan said. "That's the story. That's your story," I said. Silence. Then Dan's voice softened in the fake way again. "Look, I get that you're shaken. I get that you're embarrassed. But we need to handle this the right way. The right way. The Dan way. The cover-it-up way." "I'm not embarrassed," I said. "I'm angry." Dan's jaw tightened through the phone. I could hear it in the way he breathed. "You want to talk to Henley?" he asked. "No." "You want to talk to Marla?" My stomach twisted. "Leave her out of this." Dan laughed once, sharp. "Oh, so you two are buddies now? She show you more confidential stuff? She fill your head with campfire stories?" "She kept me alive," I said. Dan's voice went mean again. "You kept yourself alive by getting back up the stairs. Don't make her a hero." My hand clenched. "Why did you really put me up there?" I asked. Dan didn't answer right away. I could hear office noise in the background. Phones. A printer. Somebody laughing too loud. Dan finally said, "Because it keeps people calm. People who..." I pushed. Dan's voice went flat. "Gimpers." "Bullshit," I said again. "Try harder." Dan went quiet. Then he said, "We had a missing person last month." My stomach tightened. "What?" Dan's voice stayed controlled, but I could hear the edge now. "A hiker. Trail 6. Gone overnight. Found 2 days later off trail. Alive, technically. Couldn't talk right. Kept repeating dispatch phrases like a parrot. Confirm you were secure. Stay on the line." Like that. My mouth went dry. "And you didn't tell anyone?" "We handled it," Dan said too quickly. "Ow," I demanded. Dan's voice rose. "We got her out. We got her medical. We kept it quiet because her family begged us to. You think everything needs to be a press release? You put someone in the tower because a hiker went missing?" I said, and my brain struggled to connect the dots. "What does that do?" Dan's voice dropped again. "It listens." That's what the seasonal said. The one we had up there when she went missing. He said he heard it on the air that night. Calling, asking, trying. And when he kept responding, just basic stuff, nothing stupid, he said it got worse. Like it learned. Like it got confident. My throat tightened. "So, you put me up there to what?" "Starve it." Dan didn't answer. "You put a light on so it doesn't come closer," I said, and it came out like accusation. Don's silence stretched. Then he said, very quietly, "You weren't supposed to open the hatch." My vision tunneled. Rage, fear, shame, all mixed. "You knew," I said again. "You knew this was a thing, and you still handed me a key like it was a favor." Dan's voice turned hard. Sign the report, he said. Or don't. But if you run your mouth, if you start telling people park monster, you're going to cause damage you can't undo. You hear me? I hear you, I said, and my voice sounded like something breaking. Dan's breath came fast. Then be smart. I hung up. My hand shook. I wanted to call Marla. I wanted to ask her if Dan's story was true, if there was a missing hiker, if the tower was some stupid ritual they kept doing to keep something satisfied. But Marla's voice in my head said, don't go looking. Don't chase sources. Don't feed it. So I didn't call. Instead, I sat on my couch with my phone off and my apartment too quiet and my back throbbing under the bandages, and I tried to pretend I was just a guy who got scratched and spooked. That night, my downstairs neighbor had a couple friends over. I could hear laughter through the floor, muffled. A TV, a door slamming. Normal life. I drank 2 beers I didn't want because the burn in my throat felt like proof I was still in my body. Around midnight, I finally got tired enough to crawl into bed. I didn't undress fully because the bandages pulled. I lay on my side, careful, staring at the crack of light under my bedroom door from the hallway nightlight. I close my eyes and try to picture anything else. Anything normal. A grocery list. The sound of my brother laughing at some stupid video. A fire lookout tower in daylight. Harmless. Sleep took me in shallow bites. Then I woke up. Not the slow drift up from a dream. The kind where your eyes open and your body is already tight, like it heard something before your brain caught up. My back ached under the bandages. I could feel the scab lines pulling every time I breathed too deep. The apartment was quiet. No cars. No neighbors. The heater clicked once and stopped. I stared at the darkness for a second, trying to tell myself it was nothing. Nightmares. Trauma. My body still on alert. Then I saw the clock. 2:17 nachts. My stomach turned over like it wanted to get away from the number. I didn't move. I didn't even blink right. And then I heard it. Not from outside. From inside the room. A soft burst of static, like a speaker waking up. A click. My throat closed. I sat up so fast the sheet tangled around my legs. The sound came again, clearer now. Static, then a tiny, controlled squelch like someone had keyed a mic and let go. It wasn't my phone. My phone was off, face down on the dresser, dark. I swung my bedside lamp on. The light filled the room, bright and normal, and for half a second my brain tried to calm down. Tried to tell me it was some stupid electronic glitch, some neighbor's Bluetooth speaker picking up interference. Then I saw the green glow. A faint, sick little rectangle of light coming from the crack under my bedroom door. My heart started banging hard enough to make my vision pulse. I got out of bed and limped to the door, barefoot, quiet, holding my breath like it mattered. I put my hand on the knob. The static hissed again. That tiny squelch. Patient. I thought about Rule 4. After sundown, trapdoor stays locked. Don't open for knocking, calling, or radio traffic that isn't dispatch. This wasn't a trapdoor. This was my bedroom door. But the same feeling sat on it. That sense that opening it was a choice with teeth. I opened it anyway, because again, I make the worst choices in sequence. The hallway was lit only by the kitchen night light. The glow on the floor wasn't from that. It was coming from my living room. I stepped out and followed it, slow, like approaching a trap you can already see. The air in the apartment felt different, cooler, like the heater hadn't kicked on in hours, like the place had been vacant and waiting. On my coffee table, centered like someone had placed it carefully, was the tower radio from the lookout. I knew it instantly, not because of the model, because I could see the black electrical tape wrapped around the antenna base and that crescent-shaped gouge on the bottom left corner of the casing. The one I'd noticed because it made the radio sit crooked in its cradle up in the cab. The faceplate sticker was still sun-faded, but in the lamplight I could make out the handwritten block letters if I leaned close enough. Lookout 3. My knees went weak. I grabbed the back of the couch to steady myself, and my fingers dug into fabric like claws. For a second I actually thought I was dreaming, that I'd walked out and my brain had built a nightmare prop on my table. But the smell hit me. Dust. Old plastic warmed by electronics. A faint oily tang like the tower generator. And something else under it, sour and metallic like wet fur and pennies. Taped to the side of the radio, pressed flat, neat as a label, was a strip of reflective trail marker tape. The same kind I'd seen on the stairwell step. It caught the night light and threw it back at me like an eye. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, staring at the radio like it was a live animal. The speaker crackled again. Click. Then my own voice came out of it, patient and calm, the way I sound when I'm trying to keep somebody else from panicking. Look out, 3, do you copy? My skin crawled. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall, and the movement tugged at my bandages hard enough to make me hiss. The radio clicked again, and this time it didn't use my voice. It used Marla. Sharp, official, convincing. Confirm you are secure. I squeezed my eyes shut like a kid. Like if I couldn't see it, it would stop. The static kept hissing through my closed eyes anyway. I opened them and stared at the radio again. The green display glowed steady. Nosleep, like it was fully charged, like it had been there a while. My mind sprinted. How did it get here? Did someone from the park come in? Did Dan send someone to scare me into shutting up? Did Henley? Then the memory hit me. Henley's face when he asked if I opened the hatch. Not angry, not shocked, calculating, like he already knew what the answer meant. I forced myself to breathe. I reached for my phone. Then I remembered it was off. Like that mattered. I grabbed it anyway, hands clumsy, and held the power button down until the screen lit up. The phone booted slow like it always does when you need it fast. The radio kept talking. It cycled through voices like it was testing hooks. My own voice, go ahead. Marla, stay on the line. My brother, hey. That one hit me like a punch. I sucked in a breath and my back screamed. My brother's voice came again, softer. I'm cold. My knees threatened to fold. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles hurt. The phone finally came on. I stabbed at the keypad and dialed 911. The call rang. 1 ring. 2. Then it clicked, and instead of a dispatcher greeting, I heard static. Radio static. That same soft squelch. My stomach dropped so hard I almost threw up on my own carpet. I yanked the phone away. The screen still showed the call connected. The little timer ticked up. 003, 004. In the static, a voice started forming. Not Marla, not me. A thin male voice like the one from Trail 6. Ranger, it said through my phone. I ended the call with my thumb, so hard I nearly cracked the screen. My breath came fast. My living room felt too small, too close, like the walls were leaning. I backed into the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I had because I'm not proud and because my brain wanted something solid in my hand. The radio clicked again. My own voice, again, calm as a lullaby. You can come down now. I felt anger flare, hot and bright, cutting through the fear for a second. Like, fuck you. Like, you don't get to stand in my apartment wearing my brother's voice. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. I was 2 feet from the coffee table now. I could see the little scratches on the radio casing, the smudges, the dust on the speaker grill. I could also see something I hadn't from the doorway. Under the radio on my coffee table was another Post-it. Not my Post-its. I don't buy that yellow kind. Mine are neon. Stupid detail, but it mattered because it meant this wasn't something I'd forgotten I owned. It meant it came from somewhere else. On the Post-it, in cramped handwriting, were the same words I'd seen up in the tower. Hand signals don't work at night. Don't flash your light back. Only now, there was an extra line underneath, written harder, the pen biting through the paper. Don't answer your phone. My throat tightened. The knife felt stupid in my hand. Because that wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And it wasn't signed. My eyes flicked around my living room like I'd find the author hiding behind the curtains. Nothing. Just my stupid couch. My dumb TV. My pile of laundry I hadn't folded. The radio clicked again. This time it didn't speak right away. It just hissed like it was listening. I realized then, with a cold, sinking clarity, that Rule 5 made sense in a way I hadn't understood before. Keep the lookout radio volume above 3. Do not mute it. Do not turn it off. It wasn't about hearing dispatch. It was about hearing it coming. It wanted silence. It wanted you to turn things down so you could listen harder, so you'd lean closer so you'd answer. It wanted you to make the world quiet, so its voice was the loudest thing in it. And now it was in my apartment, making my own technology betray me. My phone buzzed in my hand. An incoming call. Unknown number. I stared at it like it was a gun pointed at my head. My thumb hovered over accept, because the human brain is trash and habit is stronger than fear. Because a ringing phone is a command we've been trained to obey. The radio clicked again, and my brother's voice whispered, "Pick up." I flinched so hard the knife nearly slipped. I didn't answer. I didn't accept the call. I didn't decline it either. I just stood there, frozen, listening to the phone ring until it stopped on its own. The second it stopped, the radio hissed louder, like it was irritated. Then Marla's voice snapped out of it, too sharp for my quiet living room. "Do not respond," she said. "Do not leave." My eyes stung. Rage and panic and something like grief twisted together so tight it hurt. "Marla," I whispered, without thinking, like she could hear me. The radio clicked and my own voice answered, "Go ahead." It was playing both sides. It was making a conversation out of my need. I stepped back again slow until my shoulders hit the hallway wall. The knife shook in my hand. I thought about running outside, about banging on my neighbor's door, about getting into my truck and driving until sunrise. Then I saw the strip of reflective tape on the radio again. How it caught the light and threw it back. Breadcrumb. Trail marker. Pointing. My eyes dropped to the floor in front of the coffee table where the green glow pooled. And there it was. Another strip of reflective tape. Not on the radio. On my floor. Pressed flat like someone had smoothed it down with a careful palm. Pointing toward my front door. My mouth went numb. It didn't want me in my living room. It wanted me outside. It wanted me to walk toward a voice. Rule 2. If you hear a voice directing you off trail, do not respond. Off trail. Off road. Off the path. Off the safe route. Out the front door. My skin crawled. My scalp prickled like something was behind me. The radio clicked again. My brother's voice, closer now, like it was in the hallway with me instead of on the table. "Come on," it said. "It's right outside." I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my head back against the wall. My heart hammered like it wanted out. "No," I said out loud. The word came out cracked and small. The radio hissed. Then it switched to my own voice, calm and patient, the voice I use when I'm trying to get someone to do something they don't want to do. "It's okay," it said. "Just open the door. Just look." My hand tightened on the knife until my fingers cramped. I forced my eyes open. The front door was 10 feet away. The deadbolt sat there like a stupid piece of metal pretending to be protection. The strip of reflective tape on the floor pointed right at it. My apartment felt colder. The air smelled faintly sour now, like that wrong cold from the tower's stairwell had seeped into the walls. The radio clicked again. Marla's voice, softer now. "Confirm you are secure." It sounded like a test. Like if I answered, even to say I'm secure, it would count. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe right. I backed up into my bedroom like I was retreating from an animal. I shut the door and locked it like that meant anything. Then I sat on my bed with the knife in my lap like a scared kid and listened. The radio kept talking out of my living room, voice changing every few seconds. Mine, Marla's, my brother's, cycling through the ones that work best. Sometimes it would go quiet for a long beat, like it was waiting to see if silence would make me come out. Then it would click and say something small and intimate. "Hey," or "You awake?" Or in my own voice, "Come on." I stayed in my room until sunrise, staring at the crack under the door like I expected to see feet. At some point, maybe around 4, maybe 5, I heard a soft scrape in the living room like plastic on wood, like something being lifted. I held my breath, so hard my chest hurt. Then a click, not the radio click, a lock click, like a door latch being tested. I sat up, knife raised, heart in my throat. The apartment went still again. No static, no voices, just the hum of my fridge, the distant sound of a car on the road, the stupid normal world dragging itself toward morning. I didn't move. I didn't trust the silence. Silence had become another voice. When the first gray light showed through my blinds, I finally forced myself up. My legs felt numb, my back pulled under the bandages. I walked to my bedroom door and put my ear against it. Nothing. I unlocked it and opened it an inch. The hallway looked normal. The kitchen night light glowed. My dumb shoe sat by the door like always. I stepped out slow like the floor might give. The coffee table was empty. No radio. No post-it. No reflective-tape. The green glow was gone. For a second, my brain tried to convince me I'd hallucinated the whole thing. That I'd woken up at 2:17 and had a trauma nightmare and wandered and imagined. Then I saw the floor. Right in front of the coffee table, where the glow had pooled, was one single strip of reflective tape, pressed flat like a fingerprint, pointing toward my front door. My mouth went dry. I didn't touch it. I didn't step over it. I stood there barefoot in my living room with my heart pounding and my skin crawling and watched that little strip of tape point like a compass needle. And I understood, in a way that made my stomach turn cold, what that line in Marla's binder actually meant. If it uses your voice, it already has you. Not like possession, not like magic, like habit, like it now had a direct line into the part of me that responds. The part that says yes. The part that opens doors. I called in sick again. I didn't go to the park. I didn't answer Dan. I didn't answer anyone. I pulled my curtains closed and sat on my couch and waited for the next sound. It didn't come that day, or the next. That's another thing it does, I think. It lets you calm down just enough to doubt yourself. It lets you build a little story where you're fine. I try to tell myself it couldn't be real, because if it was real, then the world had a hole in it and I'd seen it. A week later, I went back to work at the warehouse like nothing happened. I kept my head down. I lifted boxes. I nodded at people when they talked. I pretended my back didn't itch under the healing scabs. I didn't volunteer again. I told Dan in one blunt text that I was done. He replied with 3 words. Don't be dramatic. I stared at that message until my hands shook, then I deleted it. Marla never called. I didn't call her either. I didn't want to pull her back into my life like a lifeline, because lifelines can get grabbed. Sometimes late at night, I'd wake up and check the clock without meaning to. I never let it be 2:17 without sitting up. I started keeping my phone off at night. I started sleeping with a light on like a child. I started listening for static in the quiet like it was a predator. Months passed. Then, one night, I fell asleep in my own bed like a normal person. And I woke up at 2:17 a.m. exactly. Not a dream drift. Not a gentle wake. The hard snap. My back twinged where the scars had set, like old pain reminding me it existed. The heater clicked. The apartment sat quiet. Then I heard it again. Static. A click. Not from my phone. Not from outside. From inside my living room. And I knew, before I even moved, what I was going to see.